Following concerns about its staggering arrests in the 2012 Transnet locomotive state capture case, the NPA set itself a 14th of October deadline to put together a comprehensive docket for prosecution of some of 35 individuals and entities, and that deadline is tomorrow. Several individuals have now been charged since September 2021. They include former Transnet CEOs Brian Molefe, Siyabonga Gama Advisory Company's Regiments, and McKinsey. They are facing allegations of crime in awarding of an advisory contract that was first awarded to McKinsey but later found Regiment's capital being brought on board in an allegedly irregular manner. Joining us now to discuss whether the National Prosecuting Authority can indeed meet its deadline tomorrow and what implications there are in the event it doesn't is Corruption Watch Executive Director Karam Singh. Karam, good to have you with us. Thank you very much for your time. So the National Prosecuting Authority seeking to prosecute a long list of individuals allegedly responsible in criminality linked to this Transnet 1,064 locomotives deal. It's under pressure it's put on itself to say we'll have a comprehensive charge sheet by Friday the 14th of October. If it has its way, the NPA will have McKinsey on standing trial, Regiment's Capital, Trillion Capital Partners, owners Lita Nyonya, Niven Pillay, Eric Wood, as well as former Transnet bigwigs, including Brian Molefe, Anuj Singh, and Siyabonga Gama. We have reached out to the NPA, and of course they're saying, well, we don't discuss indictments on the media. We'll discuss them before a court of law, as that's where this matter currently is. But if you look at, of course, the past situation when it comes to the other case that has failed in court. I know now it has been brought in. It's got to do with that farm in the Free State. Will this matter be struck off the roll before it even gets off the ground?
Well, I think we're going to have to wait and see what happens there tomorrow. But I think you're referring to the Estina Dairy case where the NPA did enroll the case and then had to withdraw the case and then re-enroll it. Obviously, it's an incredibly challenging task that the NPA has in front of itself in terms of trying to prosecute these state capture cases. The Transnet case has been widely investigated. It's extremely complex. It involves, as you've noted, senior officials who are, appointed public sector officials, officials linked to these individual companies like Regiments and Trillion, but then also, very interestingly in this case, McKinsey. We've never seen an international consulting company of McKinsey's caliber to face charges before South African courts for corruption before. So the NPA is entering into somewhat uncharted territory in terms of what we've seen before. And as you say, if they are unable to produce the charge sheet tomorrow, then the accused will seek to have the matter struck from the roll. So all eyes on the Palm Ridge Commercial Magistrates Court tomorrow. In a
nutshell, then, what are the charges that the state need to pursue against the accused parties?
As we understand it, it's a range of different charges. Some of them come together under this term called racketeering, but effectively it's charges relating to bribery, relating to fraud, relating to contraventions of the PFMA, to money laundering, and other similar potentially linked offenses. So these are types of criminal charges which we find both in the South African common law and in statute, in terms of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act and the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. So we're going to really see these key pieces of anti-corruption legislation put to the test in terms of the charges that the officials we've named will face from Transnet.
Yeah, Karam, for someone who has not been in South Africa and has not watched the state capture inquiry and doesn't quite know what this is all about. In 2012, Transnet decides we are going to procure some locomotives, about 1,064 of them, and they decide to get some advice on this in terms of how to structure this deal and maybe get some help as well in as far as raising the money. And they go to McKinsey. So what actually went wrong there?
Well, I mean, I think we'll have to see what the NPA's case is. I don't have all of the details in front of me in terms of what was in the very extensive Zondo report. But effectively, what's alleged is that McKinsey colluded with officials at Transnet in terms of this irregular procurement, so that they actually were criminally complicit with other key people that we've mentioned, people like Brian Molefe, people like Siyabonga Gama, people like Singh, in cooking this deal, ensuring that irregular payments go to these various entities, and that this whole transaction was done in a fraudulent way, in a corrupt way, and in a way which flouted basic rules around what we would expect to see in terms of how this type of procurement is done. So it's broadly collusion between a number of key entities and then irregular payments which were then made into the bank accounts of these entities.
So questions have been asked about whether or not we will be able to have enough evidence, or at least sufficient evidence, to link these big shot companies who are bringing big lawyers to come and defend this to this exchange of money, because some of it, of course, it's money that's been exchanged via international banking accounts.
Yeah, I mean, this all remains to be seen in terms of whether the NPA has in front of it evidence which is going to be sufficient to pursue a criminal case. We know that we have the presumption of innocence. We know that in terms of being able to pursue a criminal case, you need to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. So there are different standards. If you want to criminally prosecute someone, then the standards of proof that would have been before the Zondo Commission in terms of making the findings that they had. You make a key point on the issue of money laundering. It becomes incredibly difficult to trace the funds. What happens often when it comes to money laundering is money goes into one account and then it gets dissipated and it goes into any number of accounts, and then it becomes very difficult to trace the money. But certainly in this case, there is a restraining order of, I believe, close to 1 billion rand against Regiment's capital. So that will also be interesting to see how that plays out, because presumably those are assets which reside in South Africa, which the NPA has been able to get a hold of. So they'll then need to be able to prove their case that they can then retain that those were proceeds of crime, and that those proceeds would be then seized permanently by the state.
Yeah, those who are a little bit less confident about the NPA are saying a similar restraining order existed in the Estina dairy farm matter, where certain assets belonging to the Gupta family were held by the state, but unfortunately they had to go with their tail between their legs and release those assets and drop that matter. And I've already mentioned that, of course, it has now gone back to our courts. Others are saying exactly because of that 1 billion rand, these companies are going to come in strong. They're already bringing in the big guns to come and fight this off. Do you think the NPA, with its own internal capacity, is able to do this? Others were saying they should actually be going private because they've got the ability to do that and get other bigger lawyers, Advocate Budlender, for example, to come on board, who've been looking at this particular matter for much longer.
No, I mean, absolutely, the NPA is going to have a crack team. I'm sure that team will be made up of people that are suitably qualified and experienced to pursue this case. I know Advocate Budlender was previously involved in the regiment's investigation, and he may feel that it wouldn't be appropriate for him to take this matter on. But we are entering into uncharted territory. I don't think we've seen a case exactly like this one involving so many different entities. And with the NPA itself was subjected to state capture, had its capacity seriously challenged. So they've identified what they talked about as 9 seminal cases that they will be launching over this period. We've seen them already launch a number of cases in relationship to alleged corruption within the South African police. We now see these Transnet cases going forward. So absolutely, the capacity of the NPA is going to be tested. They're going to be stretched. These cases are going to drag on. They're going to be expensive, and they're going to be up against some of the top legal minds in our country on the defense side. So it should make for very interesting viewing tomorrow. And I think it's a case that certainly Corruption Watch is going to follow closely, and I think the South African public will also follow it closely. And perhaps the NPA has also learned some hard lessons from what we've identified in the Estina case, and perhaps those lessons will help them avoid some of the mistakes that they made when it came to that matter.
Looking at the 12 accused, Karam, that are before the court, it's still unclear, of course, what other charges are going to be added and how many more, but it's estimated that 35 in total will be before the courts at the end of the matter. Do you think the 12, at least that we already know, are big enough fish to fry as far as this matter is concerned?
I think, we're dealing with some really prominent people. Somebody like Brian Molefe was extremely prominent. He was, deployed at Eskom. He was deployed at Transnet. He's a big fish. Anoj Singh, his name is all over the state capture report. These were individuals, at least if we take the findings of the Zondo Commission, that were instrumental to pursuing the agenda of the Gupta enterprise. Obviously there are other, key senior politicians, including former President Zuma, who have been linked to these matters, who have yet to be charged, and perhaps he would be the biggest fish of all to see him face charges in relationship to, the role that he played in terms of state capture. We know that the Guptas have been indicted in the Estina case, and there's an attempt to extradite those two brothers. We wait to hear further developments on that case. I think when we start seeing other senior politicians, cabinet ministers, former cabinet ministers in the docks, like former Minister Zwane, then we are beginning to get some of these big fish in front of the court. So the NPA has to pursue its case based upon its evaluation of the evidence, not necessarily based upon the evaluation of the position of the individual. The fight against corruption involves a range of different actors, and now we're dealing with transnational corporations as well. So, let's see how these cases unfold, and I think we can only expect to see further indictments and further arrests in some of the other key cases, whether those be in relationship to Eskom, SARS, Denel, some of the other key case studies that we saw the Zondo Commission deal with.
As far as the game plan is concerned, there are also questions around, for example, the extradition processes and how complicated those are, for example, to be able to see individuals like Salim Essa as well as Narayan come to be in front of the court.
Yeah, that remains to be seen now. We know that the extradition that there's an attempt that the Guptas have been detained and that we're seeking their extradition. But I think there are some others' names that you've mentioned there who've yet to be detained, who've yet to have formal extradition processes happen. So there are people who've left South Africa who, if they're not already fugitives from the law, will soon be. And, in order for those extraditions to happen, we have to rely upon the assistance of other jurisdictions, including the Emirates, who are, we have an extradition treaty with them. They're signatories to the UN Convention Against Corruption, which places certain obligations on them. They're even, have taken over leadership at Interpol, so they have an international reputation to protect as well. And we would expect their full cooperation with the South African authorities when it comes to bringing these people back to book in South Africa.
Karam, in your view, should the NPA be taking bite-sized chunks at this, or as they want to approach it, one big chunk, one fell swoop of everyone?
I wouldn't feel completely comfortable commenting on that. I think the NPA has been through a very difficult period. I think they've come under a lot of criticism and even criticism from us, for being slow in terms of these prosecutions hitting the roll. So I'm sure that they will, that they have a strategic approach to how they want to deal with these cases. There was, challenges going back to even the initial prosecution of Jacob Zuma and the decision not to, prosecute him with Shabir Sheikh. So, there have been lots of lessons that the NPA presumably would have learned and would inform their prosecution strategy for dealing with these cases. But it's certainly, something that's going to keep them very, very busy, and it's going to, keep our court rolls busy for, potentially for the next decade.
Now, we mentioned, we started here, and we said, of course, the big guns are going to come fighting because they want that comprehensive charge sheet. In fact, some indications are that some of the legal teams have actually asked for it before they go to appear tomorrow. We don't know whether they've received that or not. Otherwise, we're going to see an application to struck this matter off the roll, because it's bad PR for a company like McKinsey, of course, to be going through something of this nature. What would be the implication or the impact of this case being struck off the roll?
Well, I mean, I think it would, it would dent some confidence in the NPA's kind of processes and their timing. But again, as we know from the Estina case, even when that was struck off the roll, the NPA were able to get their ducks in a row and were able to re-enroll that case. So, it's important that we have a rule of law society. It's important that criminally accused have the protections and the rights that they have. But, if the NPA doesn't get this completely right this time, it doesn't necessarily mean that the matter's over and that they won't get another opportunity to enroll the matters again. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Karam Singh, appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for coming on. Executive Director at Corruption Watch there, Karam Singh. Just have to wait and see what comes out in court tomorrow.